On the night the Titanic sank into the ocean back in 1912, humanity came face to face with the raw power of the sea like never before. But history always holds deeper tragedies beneath the surface. 33 years passed. It was a cold grey morning in January 1945, and the Baltic Sea was about to swallow another massive ship. This time, an entire nation, one desperate to forget its name, would find itself trapped in an unforgettable disaster. The sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff. The final chapter of World War II had begun. As the Soviet army swept through eastern Nazi Germany like a wave of red fire, fear spread rapidly through Berlin. Everyone knew Hitler's time was running out. But for civilians, this didn't mean relief. It marked the beginning of an even darker nightmare. A desperate escape began. Thousands of German civilians, soldiers, women, and children flooded the ports of East Prussia, all haunted by the same question. How do we get out of this hell? The answer was a massive passenger ship called the Wilhelm Gustloff. But this wasn't just any ship. Launched in 1937 by Nazi Germany's propaganda machine, it was a luxurious cruise liner, complete with theaters, bars, and wide-open decks. It was built to create happy Germans, the floating symbol of the Nazi Strength Through Joy program. But war devours everything. This glittering vessel of leisure had been turned into an evacuation ship, now making its slow journey toward its final mission. When it left the port of Gotenhafen in January 1945, no one knew for sure how many people were actually on board. Some said 6,000. Others, including historians, wrote 9,000. The records were incomplete. Why? Because anyone who made it to the deck, ticket or not, was let in. Refugees were crying in the freezing port. Children who had frozen to death were being carried in their mothers' arms. The Wilhelm Gustloff was no longer just a ship. It had become a floating tomb, packed with thousands of souls trapped somewhere between hopelessness and a desperate hope. 2 torpedo boats were assigned to escort it. But before long, they turned back, claiming mechanical failure, and the Gustloff was left completely alone in the cold, black waters of the Baltic Sea. Inside the ship, there was no silence of death. Quite the opposite. It was filled with a constant hum of noise. People were packed together, shoulder to shoulder, barely able to breathe. The cold was killing outside, but inside, it was the lack of air. The ventilation system wasn't enough. Some people even started taking off their life jackets. They were overheating. But they didn't realize one thing. Those jackets might have been the only thing keeping them alive. A Navy officer told the civilian captain the ship should sail in a zigzag pattern to avoid detection. The captain's reply was firm. This ship is too big to zigzag. End of discussion. He also decided to keep the navigation lights on through the night. But according to German intelligence, there weren't any Soviet submarines in the area. They were wrong. The S-13, a Soviet submarine under the command of Alexander Marinesko, was silently moving through the water. The green and red lights slicing through the night gave away the Gustloff's position. Marinesko didn't hesitate. 3 torpedoes were launched. All 3 hit their target, and hell broke loose on the ship. People ran to the decks in panic. Alarms, screams, sirens, it all blurred into chaos. At first, many thought they'd hit a mine. But it didn't take long to realize the ship was taking in water, fast. Passengers below deck were trapped. Wounded soldiers, women, children. Everyone was trying to escape. but the lifeboats were covered in ice. The davits were frozen and wouldn't lower. The crew was inexperienced. The radios went silent. There was no way to call for help. Within about an hour, the ship collapsed onto its knees, then sank into the Baltic like a massive metal coffin. Only 1,063 people survived. How many died? No one knows for sure. 1,000? Maybe 9,000, maybe even more. But one thing is certain. This was the deadliest maritime disaster in human history. And here's the bitter irony. The world barely looked back. No big headlines. No days of mourning. Because the war was already killing thousands every day. Because the witnesses to this tragedy were either silenced or forgotten. Neither Germany wanted to claim it, nor did the Soviets. The truth was buried, tucked away in the footnotes of history books. But behind this tragedy lay a series of clear and devastating failures. Not enough life jackets, too few lifeboats, an inexperienced crew, and above all, thousands of people crammed on board with no control or limit. Yet the Gustloff wasn't the only ship lost during Operation Hannibal. That same year, the Goya went down, taking another 7,000 lives. Cap Arcona, filled with concentration camp prisoners, was bombed by British planes. Once again, thousands perished. Even today, historians still debate. Was the Wilhelm Gustloff a legitimate target? Yes, there were weapons on board. T wasn't marked as a hospital ship. Wounded soldiers were being transported. But there were also thousands of civilians. It's a hard question, because the answer isn't just about law, it's about conscience. Today, the Wilhelm Gustloff still stands like a monument of silence. The shame of one nation overshadowed by the victory of another. But humanity never truly forgot the name of that ship, or the screams of children swallowed by the icy night. This tragedy reminds us of something vital. War doesn't only kill soldiers. War drowns hope, quietly, in ships filled with innocent souls. And every time we look into those dark waters, we owe it to them to never stay silent, so that night never happens again.